commercial, they went and bought the McDonald's. They didn't listen to that shit. And so I'm saying to you, vitamins.
They wanted to see how the mad cow felt.
Well, I'm telling you, the vitamin system, be very mindful of what you put in the vitamins. If it isn't a whole food, if it isn't a food, because the blue green is a food, it's not a vitamin. So when you put the blue green in water, if it don't start growing, then it ain't real. If you put the blue green in the water and you cover it down in the dark and then you open it up and it's frothing and shit, that's live. That's what will happen inside of your stomach. It turns back alive. And when you got living things walking around inside of you that's going to give you life, shit, man, it becomes a thing where your sex life soars. The drive draws when you want, and you can control it even better. Your cycle becomes less, sisters. And you got to stop bleeding for anything to really start happening, period. The headaches, your ability to be patient, all of these things begin to come back when you start taking whole foods into your body. You don't begin to worry about shit no more. And I don't, like worrying is something that's going to speed up your solution. Bullshit.
That's right.
You got to get out of worry because worry detracts from your life to concentrate on the problem. And that's another thing. It stops you from going through the feelings that you got to cry at everything. Because that's a sickness in itself. They say that women, cry. Well, that's what a woman does. Bullshit. If you go to Africa, you don't see women start boo-hooing at every fucking thing. That's bullshit. People of orthobiotic civilizations who have strong genes and integrity don't cry. Because crying is like bleeding. If you knew what was inside of tears, the nutrients that you leave inside of tears, you will see that our Africans, women, the only reason we start dealing with this shit is women start crying is stressed out women. And the reason why the Africans in those days weren't stressed out, or our ancient peoples, I'm going to say Africans, let's just say our ancient peoples were not stressed out at the time, is because the women knew that anything that had to do with stress, they handed to the man. The only stress your body was made to make was having a baby. And even then, there are hormones to protect you at every turn. But when you start fucking wanting to dunk a basketball, that's over. Nature says, I can't help you there. I got to start growing your mustache, and I got to start catch you up to where it is you want to go. And you're going to see all these man-like creatures because now they're playing football. They got 700 women in a pro league now playing football. Football! Hockey! Well, we know that. Wrestling, we're talking about impact sports that men play. And that's equality. That's bullshit. Now, any other questions? Yeah. Yes, sister, real quick.
It seemed like that, as far as the cycle, it started becoming more and more irregular as, I guess it is true about the consciousness. Now, I wanted to ask you, like, whenever it comes to, like, I mean, the cycle, which is just the drops of blood, maybe 2-3 times a day. Is that, what would you consider normal? Because I feel that you believe that.
Normal?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is natural for us as far as in our cycle? Because I no longer have that hemorrhaging like I had before.
All right, well, I tell you, there's 2 different ways to stop your cycle. But the thing is that people think that bleeding is natural.
Yes.
Now, I ask people, if you was taking a shit, women, and blood start coming out your ass, what would you think? Something was wrong, right? You start coughing up blood, would you say something's wrong? You start bleeding out your nose, something wrong? Your body does not create menstrual blood just to have a menstrual cycle. You sacrifice your blood. You hemorrhage. And it was an unnatural thing that happened based on the war that happened over 175,000 years ago that changed the programming of the genetic structure in the women, and she began to bleed. But I don't want to get into that long story. It's in the book. We went over it in Wounded Womb 1 and 2. It's normal for you to bleed, but it's not natural. And the reason why I say it's not natural, because all of the accompanying symptoms that go with it are not natural.
That's right.
Every symptom that goes along with your bleeding has to do with some sort of pathology. So that means that nature never intended that shit to happen in the first place. Some women say, well, I don't have hardly any kind of reactions to it. Watch what happens as you grow older. Because every time you bleed, you shed the lining of the uterus. And every time you shed the lining of the uterus, do you know that within a year, you bleed enough blood, some women bleed enough blood to create a whole human being. Now, there is no thing that is natural that bleeds. No other animal, no other primate, no other female living bleeds except the human female. No other human being. But you guess what happens, though? They took a whole school of chimpanzees. And these chimpanzees that were living in the wilds, they studied them in the wilds, and they saw them, and they were watching them do their shit. Said that the females didn't bleed. No homosexuality.
Thank you.
Listen to what I'm saying to you. Nothing of what you call your civilized diseases. They took the whole compound of those and brought them into a zoo study environment, started feeding them cornflakes, started feeding them the shit that they would feed natural animals in the zoos and other kind of crap. In one generation, the females began bleeding. Now, I don't say you gotta go check a chimp and say, okay, well, if this shit happens to the chimp, you know, you might check yourself. But check out what happened. As soon as they brought that chimp from its natural environment into this artificial environment, it started to bleed. The females started to bleed, and then the next generation, they began to notice that the males were masturbating, as well as homosexuality. They were trying to mount each other. Now, given the foods that they gave this animal, which were the same foods they gave to humans, what does that tell you? So I'm saying to you that the bleeding of a woman, any loss of blood, the ancestors always told you, the great ancestors always told you, that any loss of blood was detrimental to the body. That's why the women always built these huts. So when they bled once, twice, or 3 times in the year, they would take the women to these huts, and the women could not stand straight up because standing straight up would cause gravity problems. And they would always be bent, and they would stay in there until they were well. Only the white woman does not take seriously the menstrual cycle. All women from the dark races always took this particular time of the year as a time of sickness. That's why they always dealt with it as a healing ceremony. You don't deal with healing ceremonies unless you're sick. Pardon me. So I'm saying to you that the sickness that women are going through now has become normal, whereas in the earliest part it was abnormal and unnatural. Now because every woman does it, because all the women are exposed to this sickness, now it's normal. But they think that it's normal, but it's not normal. It does not happen. Like I said, when Columbus and the rest of these bastards came on this land, and they began to deal with their little reckoning and trying to find out what was happening, they used to find out that the women bled only 2 to 3 times in a year. They didn't ride horses. They wondered why the women didn't ride horses. Because when you straddle and you got your pussy on them, they used to think the white women were out of their minds straddling shit like that, with that horse bouncing up against their shit like that.
It was.
And yeah. And you have to understand too, when they used to go into the courts,